Okay, today I'm going to be doing a power ranking for the EUL 2022 Stage 1 teams. I wanted to wait until after the X Vitality squad found an org, but I thought they would have already found one by now, and they haven't. So I'm just going to do it now, and we're going to run with the Vitality logo. It's possible that maybe they will play Stage 1 or some amount of Stage 1 without an org, or maybe they've already found one and it's been announced. There is a little bit of a precedent for it set in the past where the Train Hard roster got dropped. The Train Hard team played without the org left. They played as Unknights, and then eventually they got picked up by Heroic, but then they got relegated, and now Heroic has a new team taking over the old Kavana roster with one different player. And okay, I guess I'll throw up on the screen the timestamp for when I'm actually going to start ranking them, because really quickly I just wanted to say that in regards to something I said in a previous video, and maybe this will be a regular thing, but I just sort of like to clarify things I said before if new information comes to light or if I just wasn't clear in the first place. So Super went on the Pengu podcast, the newly formed Pengu podcast, which has a Pengu, and Canadian was on it, but is he a co-host or was he just a guest? Because they're both on Dark Zero and I'm not 100% sure. But anyways, those two are on it, and then Super and Marmalade were on it. And Super was talking about the whole situation with Jobro. So he stepped down as head coach. He moved over to the head analyst position for Sonics. Goddess took over the head coach. But it sounds like originally Super was planning to maybe take over that, and he had said stuff about him retiring from playing in the past, but he clarified a little bit on the podcast, and he was talking about how it all came down to if they could find a suitable replacement for him or not. If they could, then he would either go to the head coach position or some other position within the Sonics, and if they could not, he would just stay on and play. So I guess the 2022 season will see the same Sonics roster. He also said that they don't really intend on making any changes, and why would you, unless you're completely awful, because the team was quite good. One of the best teams throughout all three stages of the NAL, and then they won the NAL finals, and one of the best NA teams, and just one of the best teams in general at the Six Invitational. So quite a good team. No reason to change things up at this point unless you see a really, really good opportunity. And I guess that takes care of that. I'll just say that if you want to make this tier list for yourself, just go to tier maker and then search, I guess, this phrase will bring it up. And there was another format already made by somebody else, but the logos were a little bit cluttered for some of the teams, so I just threw my own together. So feel free to use this one or that one or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Originally there are, if you pull up this tier list, there are 10 slots here, so you can just rank everyone 1 through 10, but so that it would fit better on the screen here, and also for better ranking purposes, I reduce it down to 5. So I'll put them in order of how I guess not necessarily how I think they'll place, but that's basically what the power ranking is. I'm going to rank them on how good I think they are. And because it's best of one and all this, it could go a little bit differently, and it could go very differently. I could be very wrong, but also I want to rank them in terms of relative power. So if they're in the same tier, then maybe they could switch positions and stuff, but the order will still be maintained 1 through 10. And I thought about starting at the top because I feel like the top is a little bit more clear seeming than the bottom, but just like normal, I think we're going to try to start at the bottom here. And I sort of had a predetermined order, but I'm not looking at it. And also I think I'm just sort of going to change things up on the fly. Okay, I have seen some other people make tier lists on this already. They just post their 1 through 10 on Reddit or Twitter or whatever. Some of the casters, analysts, just some random Redditors, Twitter users, whatever. Okay, so I really want to start at the top because it feels easy to throw those teams up there, but we're going to start at the bottom. And who do I think at number 10? I think a lot of people have Empire as the very last team here. I'm a little bit hesitant because I think a lot of the reason people do have Empire at 10th is for spite, because they're mad that their roster dropped pretty well the best team in Europe. I think BDS still looks like the best online best of one team, but Empire has clearly been the better team when it comes to lands and just non-best of one in general for Europe, because just because of how the majors went, they each had similar kind of results at the majors, but then Empire runner up at the Six Invitational, BDS knocked out in groups. Again, as I've said a bunch of times in the past, it was because of the fact that BDS didn't get to play under regular circumstances. Apparently Empire didn't either, but I don't think that information has been fully brought to light yet. But BDS, we know, obviously they were playing with their coach. And Empire was playing with some member of their team not in the playing area for a while, but once they got to the playoffs, that was pretty well sorted out. Right, BDS could have done better. Maybe they could have even knocked out Empire from the bracket at some point, but getting second, it's pretty hard to believe that It's pretty hard to say with any sort of certainty that BDS would have done better than that, because it's a very impressive result. So at the moment, yeah, internationally, Empire, which is way better, but it's not the same team. Scyther's on the team still, but now they have, what is it, Andreezy, Emission, Exodus, and WTG. And it's not a bad squad. Maybe a couple of those players are a little bit questionable how they're going to do, but I mean, they're all somewhat tenured. They've all played in T1 or T2 to varying levels of success. I think Emission's been pretty good. Scyther's, even if he's been perhaps the least impressive Empire player for a while, I still think he's a really solid player. Definitely an important part of one of the greatest Siege teams of all time. And right, so again, for Spite, a lot of people have it at 10th, but I'm sort of hesitant. So let's just pull up the other teams I think are in contention for the bottom. Okay, Rogue and NaVi got sort of gutted. They both lost perhaps their two better players. And maybe not both for NaVi, but I'd say on Rogue, Prano and Aces were their two best players. Maybe not always statistically, but often Aces was on top, and Prano did quite well statistically for what he was IGL hard support. So I do think they lost their two, you could say best, most important, whatever you want to call it, players. And now we'll have to see how Kanto and Deepak do. If Kanto is anywhere near how good he was at his prime, they might be a quite good team, but they do have consistency issues in the past, and the team has changed some amount since then, and a decent number of different players have come and gone, but I do worry for them if the new players can't perform. And then NaVi, they lost Saves, which, I mean, I don't know that you'd say he's necessarily like top 2 on their team. He was a good player, and I'm not completely sure at the moment what the reason for dropping him was. Doki went over to G2, and I do think that was their best player. Just statistically, in terms of personality, I guess their most notable player. But the roster really looks to lack fragging power. They picked up Kayak and Thunder, and I don't think either of them are notable fraggers. Kayak, he was okay on G2. Sometimes he would put up respectable numbers, had some good plays, wasn't just absolute dead weight. But he's not so much a fragging player from what I understand, and neither is Thunder. I didn't look in depth on this, but I think he was largely support, or at least not on fragging roles when he played on Heroic. So with Thunder, Kayak, and Secretly on the roster, I don't know if Nathan and Blur are enough firepower. Blur has been quite impressive a lot of the times, but it still does look like they lack fragging power, and that looks especially concerning in this meta where fragging is more important than it has been in quite a long time. Just pure fragging power as opposed to really structured, clear the utility kind of stuff like we had not too long in the past. So which of these teams do I think is the 10th team? And let me talk about Secret. I guess they didn't make any changes, but it's the same roster that has not done too well. They did make changes going into stage 3, but they still got, like 8th or 9th? Or they were one of the bottom 3 teams. And then they ended up 9th place for 2021 as a whole, so they fought for their spot. And they did manage to beat Hellraisers. I think they've looked some amount better since after stage 3, playing in that relegation match, which I think was close, right? And then also playing in the closed qualifier. And of course, they didn't get first, they didn't get second. And did they get third? I don't remember who went out first. I think it was Vitality, but regardless, they got third or fourth. And so I think a little bit better than they looked in the past, but not anything too exciting. I just have a feeling that they're not going to get last, though. And God, it's really hard to choose. It could be any of these. And honestly, I kind of want to cop out and move past it, but I'm going to have to pick one. And my gut just says NaVi. Yeah, they really lack the fragging power, and they're also going to have to figure out each other, figure out their new roles. But maybe if there's any time to make a sort of drastic change, I don't think they really wanted to. I don't think they wanted to lose Doki. But if there's a time to do it, it might be now when a big change comes to the game. The map pool is changing, losing Coastline, adding Theme Park, Skyscraper, and Border, and then also Attacker Repick coming in. So there's uncertainty on every team regardless of if they made roster moves or not. So maybe it's a good time to do it, even if I don't think they're the best looking roster moves, but I'm still going to put them at the bottom. They did appear at SI, and at points in the year, they've been one of the better teams in EUL, even though, of course, again, it's not the same team, but they did make an SI appearance. They made a major appearance, but they did pretty poorly at both. and it sort of looks downhill. So I'm going to put them at 10th place, and I feel like I've only seen Empire at the bottom. Maybe like one list didn't have them. But seeing as though Empire is just a straight hodgepodge, they don't have any sort of consistency. Every other team has, of course, at least three players from the previous team. Rogue picked up two new players. NaVi picked up 2 new players. And I guess that's not, that's actually capped because G2 has 3 new players. You have to retain 3 out of 5 players that qualified for the league. And Doki was already in the league. Virtue was already in the league. Citizen. And then you have Alamau. And I'm not sure how that works interregionally. Do you have to qualify for just a T1 league, or is it you just have to qualify specifically for EUL? So regardless, they already had the 3 out of 5 thing, but then they got Alamau in there, and then of course they also got Prono in there. So he came from Rogue. So they had every player was already qualified for T1. 4 out of the 5 players were already qualified for EUL, I suppose. But only 2 of them were already on G2. So they have a little bit of figuring out to do. And I think people maybe are overrating G2 because if Empire is just sort of a hodgepodge of random players, and not random players, they are all Russian players. They're retaining that the lack of a language barrier, so they're all able to speak their first language with each other and whatnot. And G2, that's not the case. So you have some players like Alamau has to now comm in English rather than Portuguese. But G2 just looks like better players. So and maybe this is gonna be so long, but maybe you guys like when the video's long. I don't know. Let me know. I guess I'll just put Empire here. I think their players are a little bit more capable than people are giving them credit for, but some of their players do have pretty big question marks. I guess notably maybe Andreezy more than any of the others. And then Rogue, I think they could easily be 9th. They could be 10th. They could even be a little bit higher. But this is being sort of conservative, assuming that Kanto and Deepak are decent but not great. And if they are great, you can move them up. And if they end up being bad, then you can move them down. And yeah, and this might be overrating Secret, and I'm actually gonna I'll just do it like this. Maybe, I suppose, since there's all of them could technically be in the same tier because it's sort of, I'm uncertain about all of them, but since there are 5 tiers and 10 teams, I should probably do like about 2 per tier. So yeah, Secret, this could be a massive overrating, but I just have a little bit of a feeling about them that they're on a bit of an upwards trajectory, and maybe because there's so much uncertainty in regards to the maps and the attacker repick, that perhaps them not making a roster move will be very beneficial to them, and they will be able to tackle those new challenges because they don't have to address other things, i.e. fitting new players into a system. And I mean, they're all pretty capable players in their own right. I think they have just underperformed in the past, and maybe this is where they figure it out. So I'll put them here. This is what, 7th place. Okay, moving up. So I think this is a little bit hard to call. I want to say a lot of people do have Virtus.pro around the middle, and some maybe even have it a bit higher. Like, probably I could see Virtus.pro place anywhere from like 3rd to 7th. And that's just sort of been Virtus.pro's legacy. They're usually right around there, like 4th or 5th place team, just right around the middle, maybe right in or right below the top 4, which is significant because that's who qualifies for the major. And that if you can maintain top 4, that usually guarantees you getting to the 6th Invitational. So I'll put them here at 6th, and I could see them going higher. They're maintaining a pretty strong roster, or a pretty strong core, picking up 2 new players, and what is it, Pasha, Rask, and I'm blanking what is one other player, and they've been pretty good in the past. And then adding 2 new, promising Russian players, Smash by Ash, and FMAG. I don't know. I should probably have the rosters in front of me, but you know who they are, and maybe it was just on the screen, and maybe it wasn't. Okay, and then next up I have Vitality, so you can see who I am gonna put in my top 4 here. Yeah, they're pretty similar to Vitality, but maybe they don't have as long-standing of a history of doing this sort of thing. Vitality is usually just making it into that top 4, getting like 3rd or 4th, or just below at like 5th or 6th. They're usually fighting for contention and not always making it. The pickup of Mowgli, I think, is pretty good. They dropped Cactus. Yeah, I think it's just a strong pickup. And if they don't have an org, they're going to be really wanting to prove themselves to get an org. And if they do have an org, they're going to be wanting to prove to that org that they were a deserving pickup. And even regardless of org stuff, of course, they want to get top 4. They want to go to the major. They want to do well. And I think they're all very good players. So I'm going to put them here at 5th. And perhaps I'm a bit hopeful on a few of these teams, but this is what I'm going to rock with. Okay, MnM at 4th place here. So I was looking at the stats for EUCL 2021, and it's sort of a whole mess of a system because some teams play a lot of maps. I think up to like 17 or something maps were played by some number of teams, and some only played like 3 maps. So I don't really watch too much EUC. I like never watch it, if I'm being honest. So when I look at the stats, it looks mad weird about how many maps are played. And what really stands out is Usis just was ungodly good. There's 1 player above him in terms of rating, and then 2 like kind of close below him, but all 3 of those players around him only played 3 maps, and he played 10. He went, what, 23-3 on entry, almost an 8.0 entry KD plus 20. That's insane. And he went like 137 to 67 or something. I think he went plus 70 with fewer than 70 deaths, so that's over 2.0 KD. This guy was ungodly good, and that is CL. It's not quite T1, but EUCL for the most part is pretty good. So it's he's not gonna, I can't imagine, do anywhere near that level of performance, but still it's pretty big. So it's a good fragging team. They have a really strong fraggers. They have Solotov, Uses, and Tyrant, and then they have the strong backline of Neo and Nello. And Nello has previous Pro League experience, so at least they're not coming in totally fresh. But as a roster, yeah, they were just playing in CL, coming up to T1. But if their recent play is any indication, maybe barring SI, and they did pretty well at SI outside of their 10 a.m. game, so it's a bit of a meme at this point. EUL doesn't play at 10 a.m., so MnM should be really good. So we'll see. But even ignoring SI, if you just look at their qualification was pretty good, and their play through the qualifiers, especially the closed qualifier, was good. They beat Kavana, they beat Vitality, and they beat Secret. They did lose to Kavana the first time they played, but in the grand final, they beat them in the 3 out of 5. So that already suggests that they might be above them anyways, and Kavana is now Heroic. But I'm going to put Heroic above them. So they did beat them, but they also went 1-1. So technically, Heroic took 4 maps off them over the course of the qualifier, and MnM only took 3 maps off of Heroic Kavana at the time, but okay. Yeah, they're switching out Anarchic, who was by far their worst player statistically, but you'd expect that from the hard support player, but maybe they would have liked to seen just a little bit better stats despite him being the hard support. They're bringing in Uno, who hasn't played in a bit, but was a pretty strong player in the past, even if his time on G2 wasn't the greatest. Heroic was quite good as Kavana, not always being a sure thing. If things had gone a little bit differently, and I think if Kavana, when they were Kavana, had beaten Heroic, and that's the team they are now, if they'd beaten them, things would have gone a lot differently in regards to major qualification, SI qualification, all this stuff. But yeah, they were good before, and I think they should be even better with the change from Anarchic to Uno. Anarchic even remaining with the team, just going to strategic coach. So if he was very beneficial in terms of making decisions outside of games and whatnot, then that should remain. And now Uno, perhaps with a little bit more playability, should bring the roster up a notch. And so yeah, this is, I think, what everybody I've seen, I think, had these 2 as the top 2, and I haven't seen that many. It's only like 6 or something, but BDS and G2. So right, G2, this could be overrating them. Of course, they are just sort of a hodgepodge of players at this point. G2 only continuing with Citizen and Virtue, Citizen being quite good, but maybe not always impactful necessarily. He always had really good stats, but I think a lot of those kills were off of baiting and off of the woes of his teammates a lot of the time, even though he has had some matches where he's clearly getting enough kills that they should be winning anyways, right? When he like broke that kill record and whatnot. Virtue was a really strong player in the past and has had his moments on G2, but we'll have to see if this new system really caters to him and allows him to put up better numbers, or, I mean, even if not better numbers, just a better performance in general. But Doki has been pretty good for NaVi, if a bit inconsistent, but still pretty strong overall, I'd say. And then bringing over Prano, who I think was perhaps the most important piece on the newest rendition of the Rogue roster. I think he'll bring some balance to the team, the necessary shot calling and whatnot. And then bringing over, I don't want to call him the star of LATAM, but definitely one of the stars, because of course Palu continues to put up the best stats in the world. But Alamau, especially on his team, just was doing things that perhaps it looked like he shouldn't be doing based on what his teammates were doing. Just always the best player on his team statistically most of the time, and just getting things done. Flashy personality, and this team is filled with them now. I guess Prano, not always the loudest guy, but he was getting quite loud at sometimes at SI. But Doki is quite a character, and so is Alamau, and I think even Citizen at times. And this leaves BDS at number 1. And of course, if you just looked at what happened at SI without knowing the context, and if you didn't even look who was playing on the roster, you'd be like, yeah, these guys are washed. But, you know, when applying the context, it's obvious that there was a reason for their struggles. And even if we just ignore all of the offline stuff, if we ignore the majors, which they did pretty good at the majors, even if the SI thing was questionable, but falling just a little bit short of the majors, but still being one of the best teams. They've obviously been the kings of best of one online, clearly the best of one team in Europe, and I don't see that changing. Maybe the new G2 can give them problems, maybe MnM and Heroic. I think they could also potentially do it, and maybe even these guys. But yeah, I think they're pretty well, not a lock. Of course things could happen, but I think if you're making a real prediction based on what you think is going to happen, and you don't put BDS at number 1, I think you're just kidding yourself. All of this other stuff can be sort of switched around, reordered, but BDS I think clearly is the top dog going into the stage. Hopefully there's no bad mentality or anything lingering from SI going into the stage, but it's been enough time, and I mean, assuming they actually do get to play with the full roster, which they did for the latter half of SI or whatever, the latter half of their matches, but right. Okay, so that's gonna do it for EUL. And let me know if you think any of this is insane. Maybe Empire should be just straight up 10th. Maybe Secret should be lower. Maybe I am underrating Rogue NaVi. Maybe I'm overrating G2. I'm fairly happy with these placements. I think these 4 can be kind of switched around. G2 maybe could be in here. Maybe they'll even end up down here. But I think it's a bit absurd to say G2 will get worse than like 6th or something. Unless, maybe the chemistry will be really bad. Maybe it will. Who's to say? We'll have to see. So I'm looking forward to watching EUL. Just in a vacuum, I suppose maybe the most of any region because of how wild some of the stuff has been. But honestly, NA has been pretty wild in a lot of their changes with the complete restructuring of Beast Coast and XSET, and pretty well the entire restructuring of Mirage. And then I'm really excited to see Oxygen actually, but I'll talk about that when I talk about NA. I think this video has run long enough. The sub count continues to increase pretty consistently and pretty rapidly by my standards, which is pretty cool. So, I mean, again, welcome everybody. Feel free to like the video. It helps me out, and continue subbing, I guess, also helps me out. But if you want to leave a comment and suggest something for me to cover, I usually try to cover it. I usually don't get too wild of comments either regarding what they want me to cover. It's stuff that I'm probably already going to cover. And okay, yeah, that's probably enough outro rambling as well. So with all of that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.